the impetus for this paper, like I said, was to bring the creatives into the conversation. And I'm just going to quickly kind of do a review of, as we know, there have been some trends that were already sort of in place for this migration to cloud that were going on well before the pandemic. But I just want to do a quick review of those. Tax credits. There was productions have been incentivized to sort of spread out geographically. Outsourced production, studios have really been outsourcing production for decades, but with Netflix and Amazon sort of adding to that list of that kind of growth, that is only becoming a longer list. It's expensive to keep hardware on premise, and so with cooling systems and maintenance, it's much easier to sort of move those over to the cloud. And then, of course, pandemic-related remote workforce. With COVID coming up and remote workflows just becoming more prominent, that's just another reason. And then what we did find was that while creatives and creative teams were moving to the cloud, there was also sort of a hesitation on some of their parts to do so. And so I wanted to look at, I'm going to open my notes here. And so I wanted to kind of look at those and be transparent about those as well. Some folks, we did notice there was sort of a tendency to lump the internet and the cloud together, and therefore really looking at sort of the issues with the internet and security perceptions around that and putting that onto the cloud. With capacity and latency, some folks are still using FedEx and SneakerNet to transfer large files when it comes to dealing with editing and VFX. That can really be a challenge. We also found that just with troubleshooting and sort of the learning curve that it takes, there are project timelines, and folks really didn't want that to slow their projects down. And then cost. Folks were sort of being hit with these egress charges, especially when they're taking files out of the cloud. That just becomes prohibitive. So just in looking at kind of traditional connections and networks and the limitations of the public internet, it sort of seems clear that the issue isn't necessarily the cloud or the tools, but the pathway to the cloud and getting there. And so here is actually where I wanted to introduce Dave to tell us about network as a service and how it can directly resolve those pain points that seem to come up. And Dave happens to be the CEO of the company that I work for, PacketFabric. And so I want to give you a little bit of a preamble. I hope you don't mind. Dave was a key player in the formation of the internet and a CTO for innovation groups at Cisco, where he drove disruptive new technology across their entire platform for almost 2 decades. He's a big supporter of M&E and understands the complex technical undercurrents driving it. So without further ado, I want to hand it over to PacketFabric CEO Dave Ward to talk about the rest of these slides, such as they are, and dive in more detail.
Before I jump into that, Lisa, in the white paper, how many different people and companies did you talk with at interview as primary data for your sources?
About 20.
So 20 company, and they were from all over the spectrum of media and entertainment, or what was your focus?
Yeah, well, they were artists, they were VFX artists, they were editors, they were producers, they were executives, they were CSPs. So I tried to really run the gamut between up and downstream artists and professionals too, all the way from the paper kind of goes from it's linear, so it starts at development and goes all the way to distribution.
Excellent, and we'll talk about more about that at the end, but let's talk about these perceived barriers and frankly, real barriers potentially. And let's just talk our way through it and understand some of the technology sides, because the goal of the industry for techies, when working with media and entertainment is actually to make the tech go away. And I don't mean that physically go away. I mean like emotionally, mentally, and the action. Meaning the goal is to have creatives do the creative work and to have tech just be frictionless, easy button. But is ease of use really a problem? But let's start at the top. So Lisa, why don't you jump forward one slide or so?
I like what you said about ease of use, because it's true. They wanted to become muscle memory. That was something that came up over and over again. They want this to become, sort of an invisible tool. And once it's invisible and just a part of their day to day, they know it's working.
And so what's interesting about that is, so the first one with security, and look, there's a couple of really, really obvious big nuggets of security, and we're just going to talk about production side and leave distribution just for a second. But look, first, the workforce, as we came to understand, the workforce is really distributed. And so you need to be able to secure workstations, authentication, authorization of the creatives in the process, and also be able to move these big files around between potentially, local workstations as well as the cloud, or work directly out of the cloud. So what is the security that's really being faced? One is transporting things across the internet, and can they be hijacked and stolen? Second, is the cloud itself secure? And can it be made secure? And can these workflow engines work in a secure way? Well, really the approach that we're taking is to create a secure private fabric to interconnect all of the public clouds and the application clouds, collaboration, security, basically productivity as a service, but we're focusing on the networking part to connect this together with full connectivity in a secure private fabric. We have full reachability to the internet, but you really have it riding over a secure private internet with full bandwidth. So what does this mean? It means really that the notion of securing the transport, using the public internet, moving it to a private, secure private internet, and using these private gateways to get to a data center, to get to a co-location site, to get to a public cloud, to get even to private clouds that are on-prem. This can all be done with full connectivity over a fabric. Now, why do I keep saying fabric? And I think I've said it 3 or 4 times just to make sure everybody's used to the term. It's really because it's a change to the internet architecture and the way services are delivered. Old school, you create something called a virtual private network that's a plate of spaghetti of all these independent circuits that need to be managed either by a big telephone company, cable company, or potentially by a solution delivery partner. And anytime you want one of those fired up, it's additional time for provisioning. And when you have a fabric that's already lit, ready to go on demand, you have the ability to then to say, I want to go to these public clouds, I want to go to these private co-locations, I want to go to this private data center. So the security fundamentally changes of the way you're actually transporting your data. And that's a key piece. Inside the cloud, you can encrypt files, you can actually build authentication, authorization into workflow engines, and many of them have already. And so it's really a matter, how can I get it on-ramped and off-ramped in and out of the cloud in a secure manner? And that's where a secure private fabric like ours comes in. So there's a bit on security. Second, you skipped one. Second was the capacity and latency. Look, this is where, unfortunately, after spending a career trying to building the internet, this is where the best effort internet actually doesn't do what creatives need to do and doesn't do what media and entertainment needs. Media and entertainment, just to make my argument, has very, very large files that are really lumpy. And what I mean is, here comes a big file, and then there's not necessarily a lot of bandwidth or a lot of volume of traffic. And here comes another big clip or file. And so why isn't the internet programmable today such that if I need more bandwidth, I can get more bandwidth. And if I don't need it, I can turn it down. And also I can get the cost efficiencies of that. Well, I'll talk about cost in a second, but really what's different about having a real-time on-demand network as a service is that you have the ability to dial up and dial down bandwidth exactly as you need. It's all API driven or application programming interface driven, meaning it can be built into these workflows such that when you're sending a large file, boom, you can increase the amount of bandwidth they're using and get it to the cloud really, really quickly. And when you're not sending anything, dial it back automatically. And therefore, you're only paying for what you use. And you're able to have the internet deliver the bandwidth when you need it and turn it off when you don't. Instead of being an always on fire hose, you now have a faucet that you can dial up and dial down.
And that goes to the ease of use as well.
It certainly does. The ease of use part in the APIs, and basically means it's programmable, it can be built into workflows, means it's real time, on demand. We have a UI on top of those APIs, and all of the telemetry coming out. Did all the data I think I sent actually get there? And that's the easy troubleshooting part. As we jump forward, the cost piece. One, you get to move a lot of equipment basically into the public cloud with a secure private fabric and a cloud router like we have. Over 8 terabytes, you're going to have immediately a lower cost of egress, and every file is over 8 terabytes in this particular market. And by having a cloud consumption model in networking, just like the rest of the cloud, we have the ability to pay for what you use, which is all new. So there's a quick sum.
Quick sum, also a marketplace really allows for that community experience when you're working with certain vendors or studios. They're a click away, and you can go over to their page and access them and spin up a connection to them through our network. And really at the end of the day, this is about creative empowerment and helping those artists and those storytellers tell their best stories and make those connections muscle memory and invisible, like we talked about.
Hey, Lisa, why don't you just wrap up with like a quick, what is the net out of the paper that you found?
Well, the net is that it started with some sort of technical asks and pain points that we were able to obviously answer with looking at the connectivity, but there was more. There was this creative empowerment piece that kept coming up. There was the ease of use that sort of was a hand wavy kind of, I don't know, I just want it to be easy, that came up a lot, that we're able to really say, okay, well, if this was in place and if these connections worked in this way, wouldn't that change so much of your experience? And a lot of times the answer was yes, because at the end of the day, so much of this is just about accessing that internet and needing it to work the way one wants it to work.
And finally, just to wrap up, really take a look at the white paper. I do suggest everybody does. Lisa did a fantastic job really going across the industry, following the full workflow of production to distribution and interviewing folks on both sides of that coin, and really dissecting what are today's current problems, both from those who have already gone to cloud and those who are considering it, and those who are mid-journey, and really picking about those problems.
Thank you, Dave. Yes, and it goes from soup to nuts, from development to distribution, and addresses each workflow in a linear way. So please take a look. There are 2 versions, abridged and full length.